Now that you're familiar with project and section creation, we can finally discuss PSICAT's primary purpose, the description of sections. Open your project from the previous tutorials and open one of the sections by double-clicking. This opens a diagram containing your section image and several additional columns. When you first open a section, PSICAT tries to pick a sensible zoom level, but you may want to adjust this. Using the View menu, you can zoom in and out. You can also use the keyboard shortcuts, Control or Command plus and minus, which is a lot faster and easier. You can also choose a predefined range, so if I wanted to just view 10 centimeters at a time, I could do that. Or I could choose my own. I could say 40 centimeters per page. Notice that as you zoom in and out, PSICAT adjusts the width of the image. This is to preserve its scaling correctly so that it reflects the ruler accurately and that it does not squeeze or stretch the image. Objects in PSICAT are typically created with the mouse. Mouse over a column. If you see a darkened region, clicking will create an object of that size. So for example, I just created a feature, there's a bedding, there's a grain size, there's a lithology, and another lithology, and another lithology, a unit. So anytime you see that darkened region, if you click, you're going to create something. Once an object is created, clicking in the bounds of that object will select that object. The selected object is always highlighted in red, so currently this unit is selected. If I click here, now that unit is selected, and so on. So clicking selects, but if I see a darkened region like now, this will create a new thing. The properties of the currently selected object can be edited in the panel below the diagram down here. So we could adjust the range of this bedding interval. We could select the bedding type we want to define it as, and we can give it a description. Here are my notes. Notice that as I add notes, they appear in the description column. You can describe all types of objects, features, lithologies, and units, but the descriptions for all of these will appear in the description column. You can also select a description and it will select the corresponding item. So that is the other way to change selection. Let's take a closer look at each of the columns in a diagram. Let's take a closer look at each of the columns in a diagram. I'm going to open a new section to start from scratch here, and we'll start with the units column. In the units column, you can define a series of contiguous intervals. As we saw, to create a unit, just mouse over the units column, and when you click, you'll create a unit of the size of the darkened region. So I'll try to create one that's 20 centimeters long here. Units have a top and bottom depth, a name, and like all PSICAT objects, a description. So let's give this guy a name, call it Unit 1, oops, if I can type correctly. And when I click or tab away from this field, you'll see that it updates in the object. Let's create a few more units. Let's create 2 more. Just give them names quickly. Call this Unit 2. Call this Unit 3. You can also hit Enter to immediately update the contents of a unit there. So now we have 3 units. Let's look at Unit 2. Notice that its top depth is 20. If you look at Unit 1, you'll see that its bottom depth is 20. If we adjust this depth, say to 25, you can see it change size, and now if we look at the unit below, its top depth is changed to be 25. So PSICAT will always try to maintain a contiguous series of non-overlapping intervals without any gaps. You'll notice the exact same behavior in the lithology, grain size, and bedding columns. In addition to updating depths with the text fields, you can also just use the mouse. So for example, I could adjust the top of unit 2 here by mousing over. I can see the resize cursor here, and if I just drag to, let's say, 15 centimeters, then there we go. Now the bottom of the interval above is 15 and the top of this one is 15. You can delete the selected unit by hitting the delete key or using edit delete. All of these actions can be undone and redone with items in the edit menu or the keyboard shortcut. So I want to undo that deletion I just did. So now it's back. One important thing to note about deleting is that, again, because PSICAT wants to maintain contiguity, if I delete this unit that's sandwiched between these two units to avoid creating a gap, here's what PSICAT will do. Delete it. And you can see that it took the unit above and expanded it to fill that space left by the unit that we just deleted. So and that behavior also will follow in lithology, grain size, and bedding. I'm just going to undo and bring that unit back. So those are the basics of creating and editing units. As we mentioned, most other columns work exactly the same way. Next, we'll look at the lithology column. Like the units column, it allows you to create a contiguous series of intervals. Just as in units, create a lithology interval by hovering over the column and clicking to create. Instead of a name like units, lithology objects allow you to select a lithology from a predefined list. Select a lithology and you'll see the corresponding pattern appear. You can scroll through the list to find a lithology, or you can type to filter. So for example, if I type CH here, it will show me only the lithologies that contain CH somewhere in their name. Change this to chert. Notice that as you change lithologies, they're added to the recent selections list below. Each of these items is a button you can click to quickly change the selected lithology instead of searching through the sometimes long list. So for example, I could make this diamictite without even looking in the list. Or I could make that chalk, and of course it works to change things as well. Change that to silty clay. This list holds the last 10 most recently used lithologies. And this large list of lithologies is the PSICAT default. This is the comprehensive lists from the CSD facility. There's also a soft sediment list that is somewhat smaller. This list and all other default lists can be customized, and we'll discuss that in a later tutorial. As with units, you can add a description that appears in the description column. So here is my silty clay. There it is. And that's about all for lithologies. The grain size and bedding columns behave just like the lithology column. PSICAT maintains a contiguous series of intervals for each. Here we choose from grain sizes instead of lithologies. So I can choose a clay here. I could choose a boulder here. Notice that we have a separate list of recent selections that's just for grain sizes, and the same will be true in bedding. We make some bedding choices here. This, we'll choose massive. And just to point it out, these unnamed beddings are placeholders in case you discover something that's not already in the list. It allows you to continue with your descriptions. This can be updated later and it will be reflected throughout your project. So we'll call this an unnamed bedding A. And again, the recent selection list only contains beddings. If we go back to grain size, it only contains grain sizes. If we go to lithology, it only contains lithologies. You may have noticed that the width of lithology intervals changes when the parallel grain size is modified. We'll discuss that in a later tutorial. Finally, we'll look at the features column. This column is less restrictive than the others. It does not require contiguity. Any number of features can be defined in the same or overlapping depth intervals. Unlike units, lithologies, grain sizes, and beddings, a feature does not need to be a depth interval. It can be defined at a point depth or a depth interval. To create a feature, mouse over the column. You'll see a darkened square and a depth. Click to create a point feature at that depth. So here we go. We have this feature that is top and bottom are both 6.5, so it's a point. Again, we have a list of predefined features here. I'll choose Coring Artifact Domain. To create a feature interval, you can click and drag. So I could create an interval from there to there. And again, select a feature. I can give it a description. You can resize features, again, using the text fields. I could make this 15, for example. Change that to 0. Or I can resize with the mouse. When you see the resize cursor, I could take this down to 30. There we go. Features can also be moved, unlike units, lithologies, grain sizes, and beddings. I can drag this around, so I can just move this down to be at 15 or 20 or whatever. Point features can also be expanded to become interval based, so now this will run from 20 to 33.25. Again, features can overlap, so I could just keep adding features here, and if I add enough such that they go off the screen, they are still there. You just can't see them. We can modify the width of the features column or the size of feature icons to accommodate more features on screen. And we'll discuss that in another tutorial. And that's all for features. In some cases, you may want to insert an interval between two existing intervals. The easiest way to do that is to select either of the intervals. So let's say I want to insert an interval between this chert and this chalk. You can select either interval, it doesn't really matter, and then go to the Edit menu and choose Split Interval. This divides the selected interval in half, maintaining both its lithology and its description. So this chert has now been split into two. So now I can take this middle one and change it to what I want it to be, which is, let's say it's clay, and we'll call it clay. So that is the easiest way to insert an interval when you already have a lot of intervals defined. And that works for anything. It works for units, anything interval based. So it works for units, it works for grain sizes. I'll give this a definition here, but there, we'll split that one, and it works for beddings. But it will not work for features. Features cannot be split, but there's no real need to split features because contiguity is not enforced in the features column. There is another way to create objects in PSICAT that doesn't involve the mouse, and it is well suited to situations where your descriptions will all follow along the same intervals. You're going to want to describe things, all the properties of something that is the same size. That is generally the best use case for this, and the way this works is by clicking the Create Parallel Intervals button. And I'll just show you what this does. I'm going to choose 10 as my bottom depth, and I'm going to click all of the object types to create, and when I click Create Intervals here, it will create a unit, a lithology, a grain size, a bedding, and a feature, all of which run from 0 to 10 centimeters. And so now I could define all these things quickly if I want to. Chalk, and we'll just give this a name. And then you can repeat the process. And the next set of intervals will start from the bottom of the bottommost object that's already in that column. In this case, everything's bottom is at 10. So if we choose Create Parallel Intervals now and we put in 20, we'll create another 10 centimeter interval, this time running from 10 to 20 for each of those things. And we could repeat the process as long as we want to. So I'll do one from 20 to 30. You also don't have to choose everything. I could just create a bedding and a unit that run from 30 to 40. So as you can see now, that just created a unit and a bedding. Zoom out a little bit here so we can see some more. And at this point, we could continue and we could create everything again, but this time our unit and our bedding will run from 40 to, let's do 50. Run from 40 to 50, whereas our lithology, grain size, and features will run from 30 to 50 because the bottommost object in each of those columns is at 30. When you do this, when all the objects being created do not have the same base depth, PSICAT will just warn you in case that's not something you want. So you can choose to cancel the operation. You can say yes, and you'll see this warning again if this happens again. Or you can say yes, stop asking me, and PSICAT will stop warning you about it and just do what you want. I'll just say yes here. And there we go. So now we have another 10 centimeter unit here. We have a 20 centimeter lithology, grain size, and feature, and another 10 centimeter bedding. So again, for use cases where all of your descriptions are following along the same intervals, this is often a much faster way to create objects. It can get a little fussy with the mouse, getting things to be exactly the same. So this is a nice alternative to that. And the last thing we'll discuss in this tutorial is probably the most important one, saving. You'll notice that in each of the 3 diagrams we have open right now, there's a little star to the right of the section name. That star indicates that there are changes to this diagram that are not yet saved. We want to make sure we save our data. That is the whole point of PSICAT after all. So to save, you do it in the typical way. In the File menu, there is a Save Section option. There's also a Save All Sections option, so I would save all 3 of these at once if I chose that. And the usual keyboard shortcuts apply, Command-S on Mac or Control-S on Windows. And once I'm just going to save the active section right now. And as you can see, when I do so, the star has gone away, indicating that it has all been saved. If I close it and reopen it, you can see all my data has been preserved. And now I'll use Save All Sections to save the other 2 here. Okay, and so everything has been saved. And I can continue with my work. So those are the basics of editing sections. Always remember to save your edits with Control-S or File, Save Section. In the next tutorial, we'll learn how to modify the columns in a diagram and their visual properties.